Bitcoin is now being viewed as a new asset class. Should I buy Bitcoin? Should I invest at $50,000 a coin? If Bitcoin doesn't go to zero, then it's gonna go to 1,000,000, right? And this is what a lot of people are thinking today. We got a massive announcement that Bitcoin is now being viewed as a new asset class. Historically speaking, what does that mean? Should I buy Bitcoin? Should I invest at $50,000 a coin? We might be looking at this video in a year from now, and it might be 100,000, but it also might be zero. And so in this video, I want to talk more about why Bitcoin is being considered an asset class, what happens when there is a new asset class, historically speaking, how you should maybe prepare. Now, last thing I want to mention here before we get into the topic is this isn't financial advice. This is my opinions and it's my beliefs. And if you don't agree with them, or if you do agree with them, drop it in the comments. I would love to hear what your opinion, what your belief is, and if it differs or if it's very similar to what I believe. Now, let's go into what an asset is and the history behind what's happened when a new asset class has been promoted or has been created. So an asset is pretty simple. There's three aspects to an asset. Number one, there is value. So an asset, like let's say land, for example, which is something that everybody knows. It's a universal language. It's a universal investment. Everybody in society knows real estate. So naturally, it's a very easy way to associate what an asset is versus what Bitcoin is. So let's talk about land. Land has value because it's finite. You can't just make land. You can't take a tractor, bring up sand from the ocean, and then make land because that's not how it works. And even if you did that, you might not have valuable land. You know, it might still just be a pile of sand. So land is finite and you can only have so much of it. But at the same time, land can be used to generate some form of value. It can be farmed, it can be built on. There's a lot of things that it can be used for. So that's another form of value. And it also is a form of retention of value. It's also a form of increasing its value. So these are all benefits of a asset. Now, the last thing is that land can also be collateralized against, like taking a loan out from a bank in order to pull equity from this land to go do other things with it, like buy more land. An asset holds value, produces value, and can be collateralized against for more value. Bitcoin is being considered by now institutions and governments as a new asset class. So if we consider Bitcoin as a new asset, then we have to think, well, is Bitcoin finite? Does it meet that check mark? Yeah, I guess it does because there is only 21 million in existence. So just like land, it is finite. Number two is, well, can it make me something? Can it do something? Can it produce something for me? And this is where there's a pretty interesting discussion around it because we still haven't developed the infrastructure to support Bitcoin's ability to generate a return for us yet. There are some options in the DeFi space to be able to do it. There are some lending protocols. There are some organizations that allow you to generate a return off Bitcoin, but we're still in the very early stages. I mean, think about it this way. If society had just been created and you have land and it's in the first 15 years of that society's structuring, land is, you're probably not going to know what to use it for. You're probably going to have to figure it out. It's probably going to take you 15 years just to do something with. And that's kind of what's happening now. Bitcoin is still in such an early stage of its history that it's an infant still. And that's why these major institutions are buying it at 50,000 because they know that it's an infant and they know that it has so much more room to grow and to become much more mature. Now, let's say number two there, that it creates a form of value return. It doesn't, but it does preserve the purchasing power that you put into it because of the finite value. So that is an important aspect of Bitcoin. So it's what most people consider as a asset that stores value. It doesn't really have a currency effect. Now, the last thing that I mentioned, which was for land, was collateralization. We still don't have a scalable method to collateralize against Bitcoin because, again, we are in the infant stage and not a lot of people are using Bitcoin, if at all anyone is using it for collateralizing against a mortgage or a property or a car or a boat or something. There are some people that are using Bitcoin to buy these things, but collateralization between, using a Bitcoin and pulling equity from your Bitcoin in order to buy other things isn't yet seen or scalable. So as we develop into the network and as we scale these options for Bitcoin, it makes it a more mature asset class, and it will then have validation to society that it can be used as a collateral, it can be used to generate income, and it can be used as a store of value. These are all really interesting things that Bitcoin produces for its holders. Now, when we think about the value of buying Bitcoin today, and is it going to go to 1 million or is it going to go to 0? Well, Bitcoin is the fastest growing brand that we've ever seen in history. It got to $1 trillion of value significantly faster than some of the best brands in history ever, like Apple. That took a lot longer to get to $1 trillion of value, and it had I would argue, a lot more significance in human evolution than what Bitcoin has had in its increased development and benefit to society so far. The iPhone is an unprecedented gift from the gods, whereas Bitcoin, we still haven't yet seen what gift it can truly produce for us. So when we consider that, yes, the value of Bitcoin has exponentially increased at a faster rate, and as a brand, it is very well known, but it is still technically a lesser evolved, in many people's eyes, evolutional benefit to society versus Amazon or an Apple company, which has a scaled technological benefit to the societies that currently use these systems and these products. So right there, that's where there is a lot of apprehension. It's like, well, I don't use Bitcoin, so since I don't use it, it doesn't really have a value for me. But just because someone has an Android and doesn't have an iPhone doesn't mean the iPhone doesn't have a significance to someone else and doesn't have a value to someone else. So that's something to be aware of as well. So there is a counter claim on both sides, and that's where we have to acknowledge that these institutions see both sides when they're making investments. And if institutions are putting their money in, then you should follow the money. But hey, wait a second, isn't that just for degens and internet trolls and, a bunch of tech nerds? Yeah, and you know what? When gold was first, I guess, invented, for lack of a better term, and became money, I'm sure that a lot of people that were using puka shells and other forms of currency were like, why are you gonna go use that? That doesn't make any sense. Use the puka shells. We've been using it for 1,000 years. But eventually, that transition took place, and those that owned puka shells became bankrupt and obsolete, and the transfer of wealth took place to those owning precious metals. Precious metals transitioned where it was just grandpas sitting with their precious metals inside of their attics, and everybody judging them saying, you're just an old crazy man that's holding your gold because you're a doomsdayer. Eventually, people started using fiat, and as they used fiat, and a lot of these old men relinquished their gold for these paper currencies, they lost a lot of their purchasing power because of that transition. So it's the same thing today with Bitcoin. If you have Bitcoin and you are giving it up, inevitably, if the value of it keeps rising, you are going to have diminishing purchasing power if you're holding other things that are diluting at a faster rate than, let's say, something like Bitcoin that has a fixed supply. So you have to be aware. Now, let's talk more about assets. Is Bitcoin better than real estate? Or is real estate better than Bitcoin? Or what type of asset would be better than both? Well, I'll say that it's best as an investor to have diversification and invest in maybe both Bitcoin and real estate. Maybe use some of the profits that you earn from real estate on recurring cash flow that comes in to buy some Bitcoin. There's nothing that's going to hurt you there. And if you lose because Bitcoin goes to zero and it becomes worthless, at least you still have a foundation of value, which is in real estate, because it's very difficult for you to just see real estate pick itself up and move somewhere. It's not going to happen. It's going to be a fixed physical asset. So given that, you want to invest in both. Also, since real estate's been around for so long, it already has a finite supply of a tax incentivized system that is wrapped in all of the property purchases that you would have in your lifetime. So you get all these benefits from cash flow to principal pay down to appreciation to all these tax write-offs. And because it's a tried and true method of creating generational wealth, most people, 90% of them in fact, earn millions of dollars and build generational wealth through real estate. It's the tried and true model, and it's what most people have always done. But just because it's the thing that most people have always used to create wealth, will it be the same for the next 50 or 100 years? Will real estate change? Will it be viewed as something not necessarily devalued, but maybe it won't be viewed as something that stores as much much value compared to other investment vehicles like Bitcoin. Maybe it takes too much time, cost, and maintenance to manage real estate. Maybe the offset of taxation and cash flow still isn't as good as the potential long-term returns and growth rate and demand that Bitcoin is having as a new asset class. And that's where we have to go back in history to what's taken place in the past with assets. So let's talk about history again, and we'll go full circle. So now that you know what an asset is, and now that you kind of understand more about why Bitcoin and why real estate and the differences between the two, then let's go back to, well, what's happened in the past when there was a new asset class that an institution or a government or a society has accepted and embraced. What has taken place? Well, it's pretty simple. There has been a massive transfer of wealth. Whenever someone decided to transfer the main usage of candles to electricity, there was a transfer of wealth. Whenever someone decided to innovate and use automobiles in place for horses, there was a massive transfer of wealth. Whenever we decided to use email instead of newspapers and letters, there was a massive transfer of wealth. And so with Bitcoin, the next concept we have to understand is, are we going to use finite digitized ledger, transparent, of course, which is one of the most important things, removal of intermediaries and custodians, and self-custodian or self-custody our own cryptocurrency, our own money? Is that the next step of evolution to the existing money system? And that's where it gets interesting, and it's where I leave you with making your own decision on this. What do you think is going to happen with money? Do you think it's going to transition to Bitcoin? Will we back our currencies with Bitcoin? Will Bitcoin be the biggest currency? Will it be nothing and go to zero? This is something that is still a science experiment, and we all are going to learn what happens as time goes by. But what I say is, I'd rather be on the side of science and exploration and evolution than sit on the sidelines and watch it go up or and away without me. So I'm a buyer of Bitcoin. I'm also a buyer of real estate. And so I own both. What are you? Are you going to buy Bitcoin? Are you going to buy real estate? Drop it in the comments. Would love to hear more. And if you like videos like this, please subscribe and give this video a like. Let's share it with others in your network and in mine so that they can also join the conversation and tell us what they think. All right, I'll see you soon.